I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations.
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
I gotta ask you about Project Blue Book.
Okay.
So were you the director of the program?
Yes.
How long?
4 years.
And what years was that? Was 58 to...
Late 50s, early 60s. Just.
What do you think?
What do I think? I think it was a worthwhile program, and for the reason that, basic reason for number one, you certainly wanted to be alert to the possibility of them being something that, not necessarily from extraterrestrial sources, but something that could be a threat to our national security. That's good.
Enough. You state your name, please.
My name is Gerald Anderson.
Where were you born and when?
I was born October 4th, 1941, Indianapolis, Indiana.
Give me a summary of what happened in 1947 with regard to a crashed flying saucer in New Mexico.
Well, we had just moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico on July 4th, 1947. This was approximately the day before we went out on the plains of San Augustine.
It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step.
With my Uncle Ted, my cousin Victor, my father, my brother Glenn, and myself, we drove down to the plains of San Augustine, which is west of Socorro, New Mexico. And as we came around a bend in the arroyo that had pinon and cedar trees growing on it, we were able to see farther ahead down the arroyo, and on the next ridge line there was a large silver disc-shaped object was embedded in the side of the ridge line, and there was debris and wreckage and stuff strewn about the area, but mainly this thing was intact. I would estimate its size from an adult perspective to be something like 35 feet in diameter. I've heard other people who were there say they thought it was like 50 feet, but as an adult I would say about 35 feet in diameter, quite large. When we got up to it, there were 4 bodies there, not human. There was 2 of them who were obviously dead. One of them was obviously very badly injured, and one of them that apparently suffered no ill effects, or didn't appear to be injured, and was ambulatory, was mobile, and was just sitting there next to the one that was still alive that appeared to be dying.
Were they right next to the vehicle?
Right next to it, right under the edge of it. And this craft had apparently come in from the east, bounced off one ridge line, went plowing through this arroyo area, and then crashed into the ridge line and embedded itself.
We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States. Is that?
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.
We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
This week in our series of reports on UFOs, we learned a number of things. That not everybody who sees a UFO is crazy, that our government has lied about UFO information, that it's withheld UFO files, and even spied on UFO witnesses.
According to Lazar, his employer was the United States Navy. He says he and other government employees would gather near EG&G, fly to Groom Lake, then a very few people would get into a bus with blacked out or no windows and drive to S4.
When you get off the bus, what do you see?
It's a very interesting building. It's got a slope of probably about 30 degrees, which are hangar doors. The power source is an antimatter reactor. They run gravity amplifiers. There's actually two parts to the drive mechanism. It's a bizarre technology. There's no physical hookup between any of the systems in there. They use gravity as a wave, using waveguides, almost like microwaves.
It took a while, Lazar says, before he actually saw one of the flying discs. However, there were hints everywhere.
When I was let in, it was the first time I saw the sport model in the hangar, sitting down, and I was told they could have walked me in the front door, but they purposely wanted to walk me by it. I was told not to say anything and just keep my eyes forward and walk past the disc into the office area. I did, and as we went by it, I just kind of stuck my hands on it just to run it alongside the thing, and that was about the smallest time. After that, I got to see it actually lift off the ground and operate.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know these were on here. These are some of the Miami pictures. Some of the ones that I didn't put on the tape, because I'll kind of go through them here. Here's the kid in Miami. His name is Manny Escondon is his real name. He's taking notes. Here these discs came in. His girlfriend took the pictures. These are flat-bottom discs. They're made on Earth. They're called Vril disc, V-R-I-L. They're manufactured down in Brazil. They also have a factory down by in New Schwabenland in Antarctica. Here's another picture. As the news copter came in. Look at the first three discs. When they see the copter, they start to turn invisible or put their shields up, and the first three crafts that go out in a series are just becoming invisible when he snapped the picture. It was taken with a Polaroid at 1/30th of a second, so it caught it right in the mid of going out there. These discs were designed by German technology in the late 40s. The first ones we know of that were tested out were probably around 47 or 48. They're called Vril levitation devices. As you can see, they actually fly quite well. Notice the nice V formation. Being typical earthbound Air Force pilots, they're still flying in formation. We understand this technology a little bit because intelligence has shot down some of their ships, learned how they're doing it, and when you hear rumors about how the Americans are building flying discs, what we're doing is playing catch-up to the German technology that's been around since the 40s. Their technology has accelerated tremendously. They make two different types of levitation devices. That's what we're doing out at Area 51. We manufacture the devices in San Diego. They're put together by General Electric. We test them at Area 51. Here's the German disc parked down on the ground at a facility down in Brazil. Here's 4 guys standing next to it down there. There's a whole row of them. You couldn't count how many were down there. He had his Polaroid with him and grabbed a few short shots here. Over here's 2 guys here on a craft coming in. You can see the 2 guys standing here. And down here at the bottom, which I know isn't clear, is one of these old bell-shaped crafts. Many of you are probably not familiar, but there was a fellow named George Adamski back in 1962 who claimed to be having contacts with people from Venus. This was the craft he was taking pictures of. George's contacts were real, but he wasn't having contacts with anybody from Venus. The blonde-haired ladies that were inside the craft were actually from Brazil. That's where the crafts were flying out of. They've been making them down there since about 1947. They find it very convenient if they make contact or land somewhere to tell people they're extraterrestrials, and we're very open to it. If they tell them, hi, we're part of a German intelligence group from Brazil, people would freak out. I got my camcorder and I've got my micro lens on here getting as close as I can to this picture. It's a very, very small Polaroid picture that's about that big, and it got wet in the rain. He left it in the windowsill. So I've ironed it and put it on paper so we didn't lose it. And I'm copying it with my macro. Here's the whole picture. Over here is one of the old bell-shaped discs. Here's one in the air. Notice the platforms they're sitting on. There's a guy standing here. There's a guy over here just coming out of this disc. I'm trying to get real close to the bottom of it here so we can see what they're like. This is an area, if you look on a map, I've got a little videotape over there if you're interested in learning more about this information called Space Cities. I've narrowed it down to about within a 200-mile range where this facility is at and what they're doing down there. Here's the guy standing there. The discs sit down on the platforms. Remember earlier I was telling you about how the condensers charge out the bottom to have to charge the field up? If you get too close to the Earth, the charge dissipates because it's grounded. These metal platforms, they sit them down on the platforms, then they can keep the ship charged up. And if they need to take back off right away, they can. They don't have to wait for the ship to charge back up. The platforms charge them up for them, so they can lift right back off. If they would set it down without the platform on the tripod legs, they got to go through the process again of charging the capacitors up, which takes 3 to 4 minutes. So if they're in a hurry to get away, they're in big trouble. These old bell-shaped discs actually have 3 Mercedes-Benz truck engines in them, driving the magnetic field. This was their first design that they made. This was the first ones that the Germans built. These craft here were under consideration, and they were working on them in the end of World War II. When you hear about Hitler's secret weapon at the World War II, if you go back and look at the newspapers, that's what he was talking about. They were in hopes they would get these things up and working, and they would still have a chance then to win the war. Fortunately for all of us, they did not, or we'd all be speaking German today. Interesting side effect, too, once they finally did get them up and working, they made lousy war weapons because the field around them prevents you from dropping bombs or anything out of them. It ignites the bombs. So it took them a while. They don't even have weapons on them for a while, and then they had to come up with other kinds of devices. This was the first pictures I saw from the kid in Florida of his German contacts, and to my knowledge, I still think they're his best and perhaps his only contacts. I think he probably had a couple of contacts from these people. They came, they took him for a ride, it looks like on 1 or 2 occasions, and then perhaps they never came back. So we found this situation on several people around the planet, so it's not an uncommon situation.
And this is from ET technology, but it was before 47.
It wasn't ET, nothing to do with ET.
It wasn't.
No, just good old German intelligence figured it out. I can tell you where they got it. It's kind of a long story, but basically it came from German people who had traveled to India to study the concept of the Vril, the energy of the universe, and they were trying to figure out how to levitate their own bodies to move in time. And they came back and they explained it to people what they were doing in India, how they were trying to travel in time. And some German engineers tried to build a machine to travel in time. But when they turned the thing on and lifted up off the floor instead, they didn't time travel, but it floated. And they stumbled onto the idea of how to make what's called a Vril levitation device. We think they did that probably the first time and sometime probably around 25 or 27. And then the concept laid around in private circles for a while and then became a potential thing during the war and then really didn't happen until after the war.
Watch me for the signal there, sir, to start. I'll start when you throw it down. Hold it, boys. Yeah. Major Keyhole, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour. Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
The Air Force has been accused from time to time of hiding information about UFO. What do you have to say to that kind of thing?
Well, these charges are absolutely untrue. Actually, the United States Air Force releases statistics on the UFO phenomena through the Department of Defense press desk periodically.
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.